His Excellency Ambassador Brownback and the members of the delegation of United States government, and I would like to acknowledge my cabinet colleagues who are here, and also the secretaries of various departments of CTA, and international delegates who have come all the way to participate in the first ever international conference of Tibetan performing arts in partnership with the Tibet Policy Institute. And I'm so happy to see former artists of TIPA who have come back home, and since yesterday I've been meeting some of them. They're filled with emotions and joy to be back at TIPA, and they will be here for next 4 or 5 days. Some are planning to spend a few weeks here. And all the audience who are here. So on behalf of Kashak and CTA, I would like to extend heartfelt welcome to all of you. First, I would like to extend our apology because the program was supposed to start at 10 a.m., but the audience, His Holiness was in very good mood this morning, even though the public audience started at 8:45, and it lasted till 10, and audience with Ambassador Brownback went on and on for an hour and 15 minutes or so, so I think we were a little delayed. I hope you will forgive us. It's for a good cause. I want to thank Ambassador Brownback for being here, because this journey took a bit of complicated route. I think the karmic connection was not that clear, but Ambassador worked so hard. He pushed from Washington, D.C., and we pushed from Dharamsala and Delhi. Finally, on Wednesday, Ambassador got his visa to come to India, and then he pushed very hard within the State Department and the White House to clear his speech. So in the last 3 days, everything fell in place. So that means, I think, Ambassador, you are bound to be here. That's the karmic connection. So we want to really thank Ambassador for making all the efforts to specifically come to Dharamsala to be with us. When I extended invitation to Ambassador, we all were not so sure whether it will materialize or not. But finally, it did. As some of you might know, Ambassador has been in the forefront advocating for religious freedom, for Tibetan people, for Uyghurs, and people of faith all around the world. Under his leadership, he organized 2 ministerial-level conferences on religious freedom, and more than 90 countries participated. In both the times, Ambassador and his office made sure that Tibetan delegation or Tibetan representatives are part of the ministerial delegation. So our Office of Tibet in DC and Representative Ngurla and the staff members were invited both the times, and we had former political prisoners who gave personal testimonies in both the ministerial level conferences. And Ambassador also made a very strong speech on religious freedom in Hong Kong. And he has been very bold talking about religious freedom of Tibetan people and people around the world. So salute to you for your courage and for your moral standing. And I would like to also thank the U.S. government, particularly, U.S. government, the president. As you can see, this conference is organized with the funding of USAID. So both the Congress passed a line item in the budget for activities of Tibetan administration in India and Nepal, and the president signed it, and because of which we are able to do a lot of things including organized this conference. And Vice President Mike Pence I think he gave the strongest speech ever by any US leaders on human rights in China. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also mentioned Tibet and human rights issues in China. So US government has been in the forefront advocating for human rights of people in China, particularly Tibetan people. So again, I want to thank US government for all the support extended for all these years. And this year, we are celebrating 60th anniversary of the Tibet Institute of Performing Arts. And 60 years ago, when it all started, there were 24 artists or so who first had the audience with His Holiness Dalai Lama. And we had lost our country, and we were refugees. And we had barely a sky and the earth as our friend, and nothing else. And at that particular moment, when the 24 artists met with His Holiness Dalai Lama, His Holiness said, "We have lost our country, we have lost everything, but don't get discouraged. You are only 24. But if you work hard, if you persevere, you will grow and become a well-known, internationally known institute." Can you imagine 1959, when His Holiness was giving that advice to 24 refugees to keep your faith, work hard, we will succeed. And at that time, it was his words that these artists took to their heart and dedicated their life and started this institute. Now, this institute has, I think, more than 500-600 graduates. Not just that, in all our schools, Tibetan schools, we have Tibetan dance teachers now. Our children are taught Tibetan song, Tibetan dance, Tibetan culture. And then, ex-Dipas, as they are known, they have spread their wings around the world and also spread and introduced Tibetan culture around the world. And they are quite popular and well received by international audience as well. So as a former student of Tibetan dance in my high school, my teacher is somewhere here, I think a few of them. So whenever Tibetan music is played, I can't help but shake my legs, So when I came to know that I was the chairperson of the board of directors, so I also took keen initiative in expressing or showing gratitude to my teachers for inculcating in me the importance of Tibetan songs, Tibetan dance, Tibetan customs, and Tibetan culture, and then hence making efforts in partnership with Tibet Institute of Performing Arts and funding from USAID and Norzang Foundation. In the last 15 months, we demolished the old building and we built the new building. And it was all done, especially the construction took place, it took us 12 months. So even in India, I think it's a record that you build a new building, interior design, everything. But if I tell you the details, you go through a lot of stress and perhaps you'll get a few white, gray hair as well. But nonetheless, we have done it. And Ambassador and your delegation is the first VIP guest to the Institute. So we are very grateful, and it's a great honor. And not just that, we wanted to share with the world that Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts is not simply about performance, which is good. We say song is the only language that is shared between heaven and earth. We have so many languages that we speak, but we don't understand each other. But if you want to communicate with the heaven, singing song will get you there. But through this international conference, what we want to indicate is that not only Tibetan songs and Tibetan opera are beautiful to look at and good to listen to, but also this is a serious, substantive issue about Tibetan history, about Tibetan culture, which is several thousand years old, which we have preserved. It has historical significance, much, much deeper meaning than what you can see and hear. Hence, in partnership with Touch Sringla, we organized this first ever international conference, and we have experts from around the world. I think 18 international experts and 6 Tibetan experts. So they will be making presentation right after the inaugural session and throughout the next 3 days, and we will compile a book of this conference so that whoever wants to know about Tibetan culture, so they can read book and understand how rich it is, how comprehensive it is, how complex it is, so that not just it's beautiful, but also it's a serious issue. So hence, I want to thank all the participants who have taken the trouble to fly from around the world to be part of this international conference. Then I can also see some of the former directors of the program here and ex-artists. And in the next 3 days, we will also have an internal meeting where we would like to get feedback from all the artists and ex-artists on how to not just preserve this institute, but grow and sustain it for a long time to come. So please feel welcome and feel free to share your minds and share your thoughts and share your feelings for the next few days, so that not only we have managed to listen to and fulfill His Holiness' vision of preserving the institute and preserving our culture, but rather how we can grow, how we can thrive, how we can spread around the world. That is the next challenge, for which you all were invited and for which you all have come. And please spend all your energy. Enjoy yourself. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. And yesterday I also saw, the ex-artists to perform item or two. And many of them are in their 60s, but they're swinging their hips and moving their legs and, putting on their best smiles to perform the next 3 days. So there will be a lot of fun, but this is also a serious issue that you all will, think hard and contribute on how best to move forward. So I will not take that much of a time, because our chief guest, Ambassador Brownback, has come all the way from Washington, D.C. to speak about Tibetan culture and religious freedom as well. Let me end by making it a little political, because after the occupation of Tibet, the first thing the Communist China and the People's Liberation Army wanted to, and they did, was to destroy Tibetan civilization. 98% of Tibetan monasteries and nunneries were destroyed. 99.9% of monks and nuns were disrobed. Now this is based on mainly a report submitted by late Panchen Lama to Mao Zedong, 70,000 characters in Chinese. So after reading the report, Mao Zedong said, this is a poison arrow. He didn't like the report because Panchen Lama was complaining about all the destruction of monasteries and disrobing of monks and nuns that was taking place after the occupation of Tibet, even though Chinese government still claims occupation of Tibet to be a peaceful liberation. That report clearly showed it was not peaceful, it was very destructive. Now this report is very important because he submitted the report in 1963. Because when you meet Chinese and talk to them, they say, yes, monasteries and institutions were destroyed all over China during the Cultural Revolution. But Cultural Revolution started in 1965 onwards to 1973 to 75. But the Panchen Lama's report was submitted in 1963, 2 years before the Cultural Revolution, meaning 98% of monasteries and nunneries were destroyed before Cultural Revolution even started. So that means the design of the Chinese government was to destroy our faith, destroy our civilization, destroy our customs and culture, because Tibetans were made to wear Mao suits. So our dresses were also banned. So clearly, that was the effort. And when we came to exile, under the leadership of His Holiness Dalai Lama, we really didn't have anything, but brick by brick, we rebuilt all the major monasteries in exile, mainly in India. And we rebuilt this institute. We rebuilt our Tibetan Medicine Institute. All these were rebuilt. In 60 years, we have managed to preserve this institute, also Tibetan medicine, and most importantly, revive Tibetan Buddhism, our faith in exile. In 60 years, also Buddhism is back in Tibet in personal and social capacity. The government policy is to still destroy, demolish, and discourage. As we speak, Larungar Monastery was destroyed. Up to 20,000 monks and nuns, it was reduced to 10,000, further divided into academic and spiritual section with 200 Communist Party members full-time to monitor the ins and outs of Larungar Monastery. Yashingar Nunnery, with 5,000 to 6,000 nuns, was destroyed just this year. And if you can Google the photograph, half of Yashingar Nunnery is gone. And they put some, green plastic over it so it looks green. And how many nuns committed suicide? Of 153 self-immolations, there were many monks and nuns, youth, who committed self-immolation. They burned themselves. Tibetan administration will discourage self-immolation consistently and categorically, but it's still happening because they're saying occupation is unacceptable. Repression is unbearable. Our faith is being destroyed, demolished, and discouraged. This is all we have. So the struggle of Tibetans in Tibet continues. So that's why Freedom House comes out with Freedom Report every year, Freedom Index every year. For 4 years in a row, they have listed Syria as the least free region in the whole world. And everybody knows about Syria. But how many of you know that Tibet was listed as the second least free region in the whole world for 4 years in a row? The situation of Tibet is grave. The situation in Tibetans is very serious. So hence, we really appreciate all the international participants who have come here to share your thoughts and share your scholarship and knowledge about how rich Tibetan culture was, is, and should remain so. And in that context, I really appreciate Ambassador Brownback for being here, because as far as Tibetan administration is concerned, we extended invitation to you, and you are, I think, if not the highest, one of the highest US officials to have visited Dharamsala. Your presence sends a message that religious freedom is universal. Human rights is inherent, and democracy is inevitable. And by your presence, you are sending a message to Beijing. I think they will hear it loud and clear, that I am, that ambassador and US government is with the Tibetan people, for which we are very grateful. Because why? You are sending a message of hope and inspiration to Tibetans in Tibet, 6 million. Every day they're longing to hear a good news, a positive news. And person of your standing, a former governor, a former senator, a leader in the Republican Party, to be here, you are sending a very powerful and a right message to Tibetans inside Tibet, that there is hope, that we are with you. We will struggle with you till basic freedom of Tibetan people is restored, faith is granted as universal freedom. Thank you very much.